Well, welcome to Minhag Dirigo, a Jewish Maine podcast. Joining me again is my brother, Pastor Kevin Kresge of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And tonight we're going to be talking about the writings of the rabbis as it relates to Christianity. But first, I wanted to start with something that's in the news right now. Uh, we and this is Kevin and I talked about this ahead of time. Very frustratingly over the weekend, whatever your take is on the ICE roundups in major cities, they've been in Minnesota. They just started Operation Catch Big Fish something here in Maine this week. It's ostensibly they have 1,400 people they're going to round up in Maine, which is like the size of most of our towns. So I don't know. Like you're more likely to get die from a toilet seat accident here in this state than you are to encounter an illegal immigrant. So it's but neither here nor there. Over the weekend, I'm sure well-intentioned demonstrators shoved their way, maybe not shoved their way, but they made their way into a church and disrupted services because they believed the pastor was affiliated in some way with ICE. I don't know the details, but what was disquieting to me was the rationalization I've been seeing from people opposed to ICE action, which includes me. I'm generally opposed, but the reaction has been one of support for pushing or disrupting somebody's church service. For obvious reasons, as a Jew, this bothers me. One of the things that I cite to people is that for 22 years in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Beth Israel, a congregation there, has been subject to near daily protest outside their facility by a deranged anti-Semite. And sometimes he's joined by others. Sometimes he blasts music. And the United States Constitution and the law says that that's okay. It's protected speech because he's outside. What's not protected is waltzing your way into a religious facility and doing that. And if this gains, if this is allowed to happen, I naturally, as somebody that has to spend quite a bit of money on security for our synagogue on a yearly basis, I think nationwide we might be spending more on security than we are on clergy at this point. It terrifies me that this is becoming normalized. So Kevin, what are your thoughts on this? It was,
Well, I mean, it was like just based on video that was captured from kind of the ringleaders of the group, as well as, uh, ironically, Don Lemon's own production. Uh, it was revealed essentially that they had planned to do this in advance. That like they were clearly intentional about disrupting this worship service. I think what frustrates me more about it is the attempt to justify it through the use of scripture, which makes it, I think, all the more abhorrent. Like people are trying to compare this to what we see in Matthew of Jesus entering the temple and flipping tables in the outer courts of the temple, and it's a really, I mean, as often it is, right? Like I think it works the same way, regardless of whether it's Judaism or Christianity. People who know nothing about either, but suddenly become internet scripture experts, will take a chunk of scripture and be like, see, this happened here, and therefore X equals Y. And it's like entirely different. They're trying to use Jesus flipping tables as a justification for the behavior of these people and during this worship service. And it's a terrible comparison. One because this is an obvious violation of federal law,
yeah.
which we know, and people have already begun to be arrested for this now. They've arrested, I want to say, at least 6 people so far. um, which I wish it wouldn't be that way. But at the same time, if you don't respond this way, you encourage the behavior. And that's
Yeah.
not something that we should accept anywhere in any religious facility in the US. Then the other side of this is the attempt to justify this by using by abusing, not even using, but abusing scripture. And there are so many theological reasons why this is incorrect, but I'll just pull up the main points here. Is one, this did not occur during in an area of the temple that was used for worship. It was used the outer courts were, as you know, I'm preaching to the choir here. The outer courts were a gathering area where, um, essentially,
You bought your
the
sacrifice.
yeah, this is where you bought your sacrifice before you went in and did the sacrifice things. Like, this was the area. This was a commerce area. It was a teaching area. It was, essentially, if you were to equate it to the church, it was the parking lot, and not even quite even into the building. Um, if you wanted to try and draw in comparison. So to say that like that is remotely the same is false. And then the other side of this was, trying to say that they're justifying this with, Jesus, what we consider to be righteous anger in the abuse of people coming in to buy what they are assuming is a fair price for a sacrifice where they are trading their first fruits, their tenth that they're bringing in, as well as their atonement, sacrifice that's prescribed. They think they are assuming that they're being treated fairly, and he sees that they are being cheated, and it's something that's a heinous dishonor to be doing that in the temple courts, let alone you know
Yeah.
anywhere,
It's
let alone in the temple courts. So this is Jesus' reaction. There's no apples to apples. I mean, this is like taking apple, grapefruit, coming up with banana, and then trying to say it's all the same. And it's absolutely not.
and look at the efficacy of it. I mean, this is again, I'm very much opposed to the ICE. And I'm not necessarily opposed to immigration and customs enforcement. I live in a border state.
Right.
We a very large border state, and and I understand the needs of law enforcement in that regard, and immigration. There is a problem with illegal immigration, and certainly that's a thing. Uh, but what people lose sight of is what I'm going to do. Is it going to persuade people to change their mind?
Exactly.
And and I think that going into a church service and saying and declaring, making a case, uh, you know, join the congregation, persuade them, like write them letters, talk to them. I mean, that dialogue, not what is essentially grandstanding and bullying. But also encroaching on somebody else's freedom of worship. I mean, everybody talks about freedom of speech, but that First Amendment also includes the free exercise, and
Hmm.
and that there's a reason why it's stacked alongside free speech because it's pivotal. And the FACE Act, which I people talk about, I saw in the Washington Post they called the provision that protects houses of worship and makes it illegal to disrupt services at a houses of worship. People say, "Oh, it's a little known part of the FACE Act, which was originally designed to um,
Right. To
protect clinics, abortion
mhm.
clinics, and for good reason. And but the issue is, it's not a little known provision. It was a compromise provision to get the bill to pass in
Exactly.
a divided Congress. With it was a deal that was struck to balance the legislation. It's not a little known part. It's just
Right.
most people have the decorum not to violate it until recent years. Now, and I know that it's unevenly applied. One of the things. So to make this about Maine a little bit, we had a Republican candidate for the state legislature out of Belfast, Maine, uh, ran the same year that I did for state house here. She was a terrible candidate. Her name was Bevelyn. Uh, she uh, she was a street minister, but she was also arrested for beating up a trans person at a Bangor nightclub. Which is definitely not uh, and this is just from my Jewish perspective, not what I know to be Christ-like,
Right. Yeah. It's
and
questionable.
she was
Extremely questionable.
very troubling. Well, she was arrested and convicted under the FACE Act for denying getting inside a clinic or preventing, and she was sentenced to 41 months in prison under the
Hmm.
FACE Act. Um, Donald Trump pardoned her upon his second term. I have no beef with this. It was a long sentence, for something like that, and she has strongly held beliefs. I I I don't like her, but I don't want to see people sit in and the same will apply to these guys. I don't want to see
Right.
Armstrong or whatever her name is. I don't want to see her sit in prison for this.
Same.
But I would like them to face some kind of consequence so that people know that there are millions of ways that you can legitimately protest ICE. This is not one of them. And
Right. Exactly.
they're stealing the air in a sense from because they have done this. People are having to defend or fight or talk about this, and they're not talking about the core issue that they ostensibly represent. So a bad choice has snowballed into being giving their opposition ammunition against them. So there's
Yeah.
so many reasons why it's a terrible way to do things, but this is the world we live in now. I, I hosting a podcast, I probably shouldn't say something like this, but people are effing stupid these days, and it just, I,
Well, I mean, it's become everything's an ultimatum.
yeah,
I mean, the FACE Act is a great example of where they were able to find compromise to protect, uh, to actually keep people safe, but also to protect literally the expression of the first, like of religious beliefs,
yeah,
and keep people safe at the same time because of the things like the fire bombings and whatnot that were going on in the 90s. Like
yeah,
that was, yeah. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, and so like the FACE Act was a great example of the kind of compromise that we seem to be unable to find anymore.
yeah.
And it's not good when you hear the rhetoric that's being used by the people who kind of coordinated this. I can't remember the guy's name. But uh, he's everything is very much like it's very volatile. It's extremely incendiary. It's like inflammatory is the word I was looking for. Um, it's if we don't get this, if nothing happens, we have to be, you have to be shoving them around. You have to be doing this. You have to be doing like no, we really don't.
No,
Uh,
let's make the arguments to persuade, and I think there's a very strong theological argument to be said for, the 36 times or so that the Torah says, treat the stranger how you supposed to treat the stranger in your midst, and that's something that
mhm.
I think all of our faiths agree on, and it's just a matter of degrees, like how much are we willing to tolerate from the government? Well, that's a conversation that we need to have, not browbeating people into going on there because they're not going to respond to it.
No.
Uh, it hasn't worked.
Well, what you
I
create instead of somebody who might be willing to work with you in the future is you absolutely create an enemy.
yeah.
You create an opponent. You don't create somebody who's willing to even hear you at that point. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, this is the reality that I mean, this is what we're seeing in New York City with Mamdani and his equivocation. You know, there are synagogues that are hosting events and they're being protested because the event might be Zionist or they're just a synagogue and people are anti-Semites
Hmm.
and and as a libertarian, I don't want the government to say people can't protest outside. I don't. But these people don't, and it'd be the same of any political movement these days. People don't stop at the gates. People, we saw this with the campus action. There's legitimate speech, there's legitimate protest, and then there's harassment of people, and it
Oh
always
yeah.
crosses the line. That nobody controls the malcontents. And you go into a church, you may well say, gosh, I'm going to sit in this pew, and then and this is what she described as, and even if she did this, it's still criminal. She sits there very respectfully, gets up and engages the pastor at some point, and I admire her for being respectful, and but you you can't control all the people that come with you. You don't
Right.
control all the variables, and chaos ensues. And I tell you, you pull something like that in one of our synagogues these days, you're going to get your own side hurt, because
Yes,
we don't have we don't have the luxury of trying to figure out whether or not this is peaceful protest or a
or
dangerous
something else.
situation.
Yeah. Well,
And
and churches, it's the same in churches now. And I mean, even in just the past few years, of course, I mean, there have been shootings in and around churches in Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, uh, and the question is no longer, what do we do? It's there. The choice is you prepare or not.
yeah,
And what I'm seeing again, and I think what after this demonstration, um, in the church sphere, on social platforms, I am seeing a lot of conversation around, is your church ready?
yeah,
Like, so the question is no longer how would we ha even try and open or maintain a dialogue here. It's simply now the conversation has moved to, are you ready as a church? Is your church ready to, are you prepared to be able to handle a situation where people forcibly enter your building and attempt to take it over? It's not even a question of like try and hear them out or even have discussion. The assumption is going to be now it's going to be an unruly mob and people, the intent is to harm.
yeah.
And
And
that will only end badly.
yeah, and it's all preventable. I mean, this is, and I know the people that did the protest inside the church. I know that they're passionate Christians themselves, from what I understand. One of one of the ladies was a pastor, I believe. Um,
Hmm.
so it just, why not invite people to a dialogue? Because,
Right.
and that's why not. We're not going to solve this by yelling past each other and these
No.
things. And we desperately need to solve it. We desperately need to get back to some kind of a consensus
Well,
national morality in how we conduct our affairs. And it's,
I don't know if you remember this from when we were younger. I want to say we would have been teenagers, but one of the things that we did in the Lancaster area that a lot of I don't know if it was like a synod thing or like people just got together, like the religious leaders in the area. I think Rabbi Jack was part of it. Um,
it would
they
have been Rabbi
put the
Sophian at the time, but
Okay.
yeah,
I
I
well,
do
I
remember it.
think I think Jack came over. I think Jack was the one that came over.
If if we were
But
teenagers, it would have been before his time by a
okay.
year or two.
I thought it
He
was
didn't.
him.
Yeah, it would have
But
been. But Rabbi Sophian was really popular as well. So I mean, it
okay.
was.
That might, yeah. I mean, and we're talking like
It's a long time, 30,
it's a
well over
while
30
ago.
years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we had um someone for one of the Mormon guys in.
Oh, I remember
I
that.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think we
It-
had I think Father Veronis came over from Ascension, Greek
yeah.
Orthodox. We had one of the local Catholic priests came in. Um,
We
the
even had a Christian Scientist.
Yes, and it was like this great forum that every week we had somebody speak about, and it was just and I think it was well attended too. I think I want to say we had like 100 people there every time,
And we
and it
didn't
was
make
this
fun of the
nice little.
Mormons.
No,
We
we
did.
didn't make fun of the Mormons.
I mean, we should.
I
No, I'm
did
just
after I
kidding.
got a copy of the book. No, I'm sorry.
No,
I
it
did
was.
after I got a copy of the book that I still have, actually. I still have that Book of Mormon that I got off the guy. And I'm like even back then I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, this is
Um
it makes you worry too, because
need
it's
to know
like
where Joseph Smith was growing his uh
I,
yeah, it had his
I
grow house located because must have been
did
some
I
good soil.
did I ever tell? I will share a story, and I apologize. This is when I was a born again bachelor in living in Rochester. I was visited. Now, ordinarily, when you get LDS missionaries come to your place, they, if you're a male, they try to send males. If you're a woman,
Right.
they try to send, for probably for the protection of, and reasonably so. But it was two very comely Mormon young ladies that came to my place and really made the pitch. And I was like, all right, one of these is, and I'm going to sound like such a pig. one of these girls is hot, and I really think she's sweet, and I'm gonna try and reverse missionize her. And and it didn't work, but over the series of weeks, they came and they read me things about the pearl of great price and all this stuff. And we went to visit the Smith Farm and Hill Cumorah Visitor Center in Palmyra, New York. And it was the weirdest experience I've ever had. They have this huge visitor center where they show like this movie, The Prophet of the Restoration, on like
Oh yeah.
repeat. They've got like every book, every language translated version of the Book of Mormon sitting in there. And then they have this huge, like super buff statue of Jesus, which is actually one of the better statues of Jesus I've ever seen. He was
Better
like, you
than
wouldn't
Buddy
like
Christ
Jesus when
from
he's
the.
angry. Yeah, not like Buddy Christ, but more this is the guy you don't want flipping your tables. And he is a serious Jesus. And
Get
then
into
late,
heaven. Ah.
yeah, that's right. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Get to the chopper. It
Oh,
was
so bad.
great.
Iris is
It-
probably in the next room, like, what the heck are these two doing?
I know, right? But so ultimately, then we went to I got to go to the pageant they have there at the Hill Cumorah, and I was just confused. None of it made sense. They're burning some guy at the stake, and I'm like, why are they burning that guy at the stake? And they're like, oh, that's the Prophet Abenaki or whatever, and I'm like, okay, what does
Right?
that even mean?
What is
And
it's like the double
so
rainbow. What does it mean?
so my favorite part of this whole thing is there's this guy and they all wear name tags, which is really convenient because then you can say
Hmm.
like, oh hey, but Elder so and so, Elder McBerry butt, is dressed up like a hobbit or like German lederhosen or something, walking around with this big hand carved lacquered walking stick, and he's like, ah yes, the Gentiles really like to come here because it's so serene. I'm like, I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't see anything but goyim. What are you talking about, Gentiles? You're a Gentile. You're the biggest goy of them all here, you hobbit looking dude. And so it was
He wasn't a purveyor of art, was he? Like,
no, no. But the whole experience, and they finally got wise to what I was up to, and they traded out the missionaries for some
yep.
very serious young men with the little black ties and the
Ah,
short sleeve white shirt, button down shirts. And I was like,
less enticing.
send the girls back. And they did not. But and I never really got in touch. I assume one of them's living in Provo and is probably somebody's sister wife,
Oh,
and the other one, I really hope she. It was one of those things where it was heartbreaking because she did share her personal testimony, and I won't share the because
right.
it was sensitive. But you know, she was one of those people that came from like specific childhood trauma, and she was looking for an answer for something. And God bless the Latter-day Saints, they gave her that. And whatever weird made up stuff they've got going on, I've never met a Mormon who is not a fundamentally decent human being. So you know, it's although I haven't met that many Mormons, but you know, it's Dad has more stories with his visits to Salt Lake City for
True.
Novell than
Yeah, he does.
but, but you know, if I have any Mormon listeners, I don't mean to offend. I make jokes about my own faith all the time. You know, if you ever hear about me waving the chicken around my head, it's weird. I know denying it, you know, that it's, we got some, I mean, circumcision. Yeah. You know, so
Oh man.
we're not like glass houses, no stones thrown. We have weird shit too. So it's, uh, but no, I don't
All
even
right.
remember what we're talking about, but
Oh yeah. No,
Mormons.
well, we were talking about the whole thing, and yeah, we were talking about everything in Minnesota, but I know we had other stuff we were going to talk about tonight.
Yeah. So, and it's not a lot because this is the problem. Judaism did not really talk about Christianity or Jesus all that much. And, and I don't think it was because of any other reason than, you know, at the time and circumstances, they were just really busy figuring out their own stuff. And, and, you know, after the destruction of the second temple and the heading of the diaspora, the Jews ended up living, the power base for Judaism at the time kind of ended up being back in two places. Um, the Galilee, Galilee area ended up being the center for a lot of Jewish learning. You get the Jerusalem Talmud published
Hmm.
out of that time period. Uh, and then there's whatever happened, Babylon,
Yeah, the Babylonian Talmud. Yeah.
so I mean we had,
But
and
that
so in
wasn't
both,
until later. I mean, that was fifth or sixth century when that was
yeah, and I
collected.
mean
So
now the Mishnah itself that they're both based on, probably around the same
what
time, technically
what
speaking.
200-ish?
Yeah, I mean we have an argument about, internally, about when the rabbinic era of Judaism really begins, and
Mm.
some say that it starts with Nehemiah and Ezra and the return from Babylon, because it starts to become a little more decoupled from temple worship and more about the Torah and the law and those things. But it really, but some people say it was during the Hasmonean period. But whatever happened, it really came alive you know, after the diaspora started. And so the rabbinic literature at the time, really, there's a huge body of texts with all with different aims. We had the Mishnah, we had a Tosefta, which is some people say it was commentary on the Mishnah. Others say it was a separate development from the Mishnah. Uh, and, Jesus appears in some texts.
In Tosefta, I know there's some references, but not like, well, there's questions of, well, I mean, there's like, I would say there's more recognition based on what I was, and I mean, I did some quick research, right? Just to, because this is not something I had time to sit down and like be like, hey, I want to get in this and read. Uh, but like, I did see that there's reflection more of, while Jesus is mentioned by name, that's questionable, but there's more reflection of Jewish awareness of what Christians are teaching about uh, miracles,
Yeah.
more than necessarily, but it's not historical testimony. So it's not necessarily something that could necessarily be relied on in terms of, because there's a lot of ambiguity about like timelines and people, as what
Yeah.
I understand. Because I was reading, what is it, Peter Schaefer, or I think that's the name, and I think he worked on a couple of these different things as from like a scholarly perspective. So I was reading some of his writings about a few of these pieces, like the Babylonian Talmud and the Tosefta and the Jerusalem Talmud, because he's got a few things published about them. So that's where, I just had some notes that I scribbled down quickly that
Yeah.
I'm referencing.
Well, it's interesting. The Tosefta has, and I'm never convinced I'm pronouncing that right, by the way. Years and years into it, I'm still like, but there is a part where they think they reference, Jesus's execution.
Hmm.
Um,
Because like what they call, is that where they call him, refer to him as Yeshu ben Pantera?
no, this one and that one we're not convinced actually is really referencing Jesus either.
Right. That's, well, I know that was the identity that like that was kind of questionable.
Yeah, let me see if I can find this Safari link. I tried to save all my things, and I'll share my screen, or at least this window here. If I can find it, Rabbi Meyer. Where are we at? Rabbi Meyer. I should have had this prepared. I did not. Um,
Well, that's
there's
okay.
Rabbi.
I took notes as quickly as I could.
There we go. Rabbi Meyer. Meyer. Okay. Let's share my screen, or at least one part of it. So hopefully this shows up here.
Yeah.
Good, good, good. So here we go. Rabbi Meyer Omer Ma. So this is, in Rabbi Meyer said, what is the meaning for a curse of God is that he is hung? And that's, from Devarim 21:23, or Deuteronomy.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's like the case of two brothers twins who resembled each other. One ruled over the whole world, the other took to robbery. After a time, the one who took to robbery was caught, and they crucified him on a cross. And everyone who was passed to and fro said, it seems that the king is crucified. So we see that here in this
Yeah.
text. And therefore it is said, a curse of God is he is hung. And it's you know the starting point of the Mishnah is the meaning of the biblical passage from Deuteronomy,
Hmm.
and you have to understand it in the context of the whole quotation of the verse, which reads, "His corpse must not remain all night upon the tree. You shall bury him that same day. For anyone hung on a tree is under God's curse. You must not
Right.
defile the land that the Lord your God is giving you for your possession." Blah blah blah. So, you know, Rabbi Meyer was asking what that passage means, more or less, and that, you know, so it's the passage possibly refers to Jesus and describes the relationship between Jesus and God in terms of two brothers.
Mm.
Um, I don't like that implication because it's kind of mean. The
Right.
God, there's God is the one who rules the world, and the one who took the robbery would be Jesus. But
Right.
I mean, it that kind of condemnation it just feels a little too oblique to be weird, to be real.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think, I guess, like the later interpolation and kind of some polemics play into it in terms of like how that could be looked at.
Yeah,
Um, well, I mean, because like the natural instinct, I think, of anyone is to, when we're reading historical text, given kind of hindsight, is we fit the text to what we know happened. And because it's real easy for us to look back into history and go like, oh, hey, well, like here's a spot where this prophecy was fulfilled.
yeah,
Because we see, this happened over here or that happened over there. Or I mean, like if we likened it to today, right? Like at some point, and I almost feel like God would be like ha 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 about it. All these people who keep predicting the rapture and end times stuff, and he's going to just keep yanking that carpet out from under him every time that they predict it. It's like next Tuesday. He's going to be like, okay, well, no, now it
yeah,
definitely won't be next Tuesday. But like it's kind of like that where we kind of fit. I mean, I don't want to say prophecy because then it sounds like I'm mocking maybe like what even I believe, which I'm not. Um, but we so often will go back and look in history and say like, okay, well, here's a thing that um, we have this documented. Great example would be the archaeological evidence that has been found for the Exodus, and it's not insignificant. But what it does is it does tell different stories from what are the recognized dates for when the Exodus took place and the arrival
yeah,
into the Promised Land, um, into like within a few hundred years of disparity, where there's early Exodus and late Exodus theory. And more and more evidence has been appearing that supports early Exodus theory from an archaeological perspective because we're finding things that are dated to that earlier period. But it's like, it's so easy for us to go to want those to fit.
yeah.
Like, it's like when people go to, uh, oh, starts with a B, the city in the south,
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but
Beersheba,
yeah,
and they'll go to Mamre outside of Beersheba, and they'll see, uh, you know, the hole in the ground near the one of the locations known for Abraham's well, and they'll say, "Oh, well, this must be where the tree was, and therefore this is where Abram set up his tents."
it's
Like,
like it's like when I was
okay,
in the Sinai. Is that the bush? Is that the bush?
is that the bush? Yeah, right. Like, it's
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's like it's like when I was in Israel the other year, and we're walking around, and I'm like, okay, so how old is that stone?
yeah. And if you turn it
Like,
over,
did
does it say "made by God"?
Yeah,
It's
right. Like, did he walk there? Was that it's like if somebody goes to the Valley of Elah and they're walking around and they're picking up all the rocks, right? Is this the one that David threw? Like, it's that kind of uh that habit that we have to make history and our perception of history fit what we have recorded.
Well,
and
it's like the
so there's
paranormal
some of that maybe
investigator
here.
stuff.
Yeah. Oh
It's
God, the self-fulfilling stuff that, yeah.
yeah, my Nezzy's really into the like she likes watching those like ghost paranormal
Oh man.
investigation videos, and I
As long as it's not
and
that one out of the UK. That one is so bad.
she knows the term pareidolia, and she's familiar with how like we tend to template the things we see based off of like we find faces and random or accidental
Yeah.
arrangements, and she and I think we do the same thing. Humans just do that with everything. We do that with
Yeah.
history. We do it with, and as much as I want to find evidence of all the things, it's uh, and that's why I think we do that with the Talmud to a certain degree. When people come to you and they say, and this is one of the things that I think Jews need to ask our Christian friends to do more of is to let people know that the Talmud is maybe talking about Jesus, maybe it's not. I do think like there's one in the Babylonian Talmud that we know is probably talking about Christianity.
Right.
And that's, if a man says to you, I am God, he's definitely a liar. And if he says,
Right.
I am the Son of Man, and in the end, people will laugh at him. And if he says, I will go up to heaven, he says, uh, but he won't do it. And we're talking about, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
but you don't need to
Well,
expressly
and that would
mention
probably
Jesus.
be based on, let's see if my notes are right. Sanhedrin 43, Sanhedrin
That
107
This is Ta'anit
from Babylonian Talmud.
Talmud. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
65b in Ta'anit.
65. Okay. All right. Yep. Okay. I have that one here too. And
Yeah.
so, and the critical issues that I believe were referenced are like there's some like chronological impossibilities and stuff with the Babylonian, and then of course it's that satirical tone.
It, we, and we have
That
and we just had a problem with like a failed Messiah. Bar Kokhba just, you know, as far as failed Messiahs go, if we're talking about them like on that continuum, honestly, Jesus himself, and I don't know if he's a failed Messiah or not. I think that's a relatively nasty thing to say about somebody when it's not clear that he did any real damage to the Jewish people at all.
right,
During his lifetime he developed followers, but his followers weren't the reason why Rome sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the
right.
temple. Bar Kokhba was. So Bar Kokhba is definitively a failed Messiah. So we had, we've cultivated this
Well,
sensitivity
I
to
mean, let's place blame where it belongs on the
Rome.
centurion that thought it was a, yeah. Let's place blame where it belongs. That was on that centurion who thought it was a good idea to go slice that pig up and
Yeah.
throw it. Yeah, no, that no, like that. That was
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
The
like blaming the
reaction,
colonizer, blaming the colonized and not the colonizer for
right? Oh yeah,
the
no, like it was that was on Rome. Like I mean, the reaction was
but we still look at
understandable.
it's like Shabbatai V later, much centuries later, and he resulted in his a lot of trouble for Jews and a lot of his followers and converted to Islam along with him.
Yeah,
And then recently, one of for many years I was with Chabad Lubavitch, and we had a lot of people in the movement really believed that the Rebbe was going to come back. He was just in concealment. He wasn't. He didn't really die.
right,
That he was King Messiah, and it, it just these things are for the Jewish mind it's been more problematic than it's been helpful, and I think it's less about Christianity in these things and more about like trying to establish a rabbinical power base at the time.
right. Well, and the Babylonian one, Talmud definitely is more. Seems like it came off more as like, well, it's obvious that there was some agitation there,
and, and
and
we did in Babylon there were hardly any Christians at the time. It was all
right.
Zoroastrianism pretty much, and so
Because
it
that was
was
pretty far east. I mean, that was pretty far east because I mean, that was fifth or sixth century. So, I mean, it's like at that point, the church is already established by Rome,
yeah,
but
but
hadn't really started to move in that direction. Well, if we're talking like Assyrian, Babylonian Empire geography, Christianity had already moved east of there, but hadn't really started to spread there yet. Turkey, as far east as India, northern Africa, certainly into Europe. Um, but for some reason, that particular geographic region, no. And it begs the question then, is this why? And I would love to know that from a historical perspective. Was it just, let's just go our separate ways for a little while?
Yeah.
You know, let's be. Well, it's like what do we say with the Brits? Like brothers separated by a common language. Like that they just decided to say, you know what? Like we're not going to agree on this. Let's just go this way and that way for a minute. But we
You know what's
certainly, I mean, no, like historically, I mean, the Jewish Christians were definitely digging in,
you know
even
what,
secretly.
what's so interesting is that the rabbis, I mean, the closest contemporary rabbinical writings, none of them mentioned his messiahship. Um,
Right.
there was
Well,
there was definitely hostility to the person of Jesus.
right.
Um, but it just
Well, and I always wonder if that's more the fact that like none of his teachings were necessarily outside of tradition.
yeah, they sounded a lot like many of his contemporaries, and
Yeah, I mean, quite often, I mean, when you look at his teachings, they're not really that far outside of, the Jewish tradition and Jewish law. And I think there are obvious reasons why he's Jewish. So, I feel like, but then there's that, what was it? One of them, there was something I had on my notes here I'm looking for. It's not super important, but I mean, I almost think that may be why, is if it wasn't widespread at that point in terms of that idea of him being Messiah, um, that that may not have been like if they're outside of that local area and they're not hearing that, um,
it's
then
probably
it may not be something that they know,
yeah,
like that, and at that point, like, is that something that somebody's going to want to bring up?
right. And
You know,
and honestly, it could well have just been too that, here they are, they're trying to establish a power base in the vacuum
right?
that's created.
Oh yeah, just
And
get reconnected.
and it was this ability to draw followers that was more problematic than anything,
Right,
in life and in death. So that's probably where a lot of that, dynamic came in. It was, hey, because it's not till later that we start having the theological disputes, much later that we
right.
start, and that is the next thing. Let me, I,
Well, and that I think definitely stems from when we got into like Justin, because you mentioned Justin Martyr, I think in your message.
yeah,
And like that was one of those things where like the early church fathers at this point, and this was one of those things that like came up right before, the Christmas holidays where, there's always that kind of spreading of the idea that Christianity is somehow pagan, that Christmas is a pagan, is a riff on pagan holidays, which it's not. That's been long since disproven. But it still seems to be this popular notion. But when you look at it, what's interesting is when you look at the church fathers, so much of what they were doing in terms of establishing a lot of those religious holidays was creating an identity in Christianity separate from the faith that bore it, that is to say, Judaism. And so,
yeah,
like, it's create like I almost felt like the early church fathers were looking for ways to distinguish Christianity from Judaism, and basically not have anything or not have a lot outside of Jesus, not have a lot be reliant on Jewish tradition.
yeah,
So essentially establishing new traditions that weren't connected to um, like Jewish tradition,
yeah,
so that they're not reliant on like and I don't know if that's the right language, but I think it is
well,
in a way.
I think for a lot of it, like at that point in both of our developmental histories as faiths, I gather that both of us were treating the other as relative abstractions,
Hmm.
and not really like we weren't really real to each other at that particular point other than, hey, these things happened, these events took place, and here we are. It's
Yeah.
um,
I mean, it's like recognition that the other existed, but like not there's like little desire to interact or be connected in any way. And
no,
like Justin, the way Justin Martyr put it was like, don't begrudge Jews Jewish tradition, but at the same time, as Gentiles, don't go seeking to be bound to Torah because you're not bound to Torah as Gentiles. Like so, which was in alignment with what they're in seeing scripturally as instructions from like Paul and Peter later. So like, yeah, I mean, I don't think historically there was like a necessary. Well, ironically, I think the greater animosity comes later.
well, and
Uh,
that's the good part to get to. That's a good
yeah.
segue because one of the central prayers of Judaism, and we say it at every prayer service, is the Amidah or the Shemona Esrei, which literally is 18 paragraphs.
Hmm.
Although I think we actually really have 19. But one of them is called Birkat Ha-Minim, which is it's not a benediction, it's more of a malediction of heretics.
Mm.
Um, and it's caused us trouble with the Christians over the years because we're probably talking about them. Um, it's uh, Velamo Loshinim al Tehi, yeah, frustrate the hopes of those who slander us. Let wickedness vanish and those who are your enemy disappear. May the dominion of arrogance be utterly destroyed speedily and in our days. Blessed are you, O Lord, who crushes his enemies and subdues the arrogant. Uh, and the word minim, biamenu, um, no, that's the wrong one. But anyway, minim is the word we use for uh, heretic in this case, and they and Jerome, Justin Martyr all called this prayer uh, unambiguously attacking Christianity,
Mm.
and we've gone back and forth that it was because we could have also been talking about the Sadducees, the Essenes, and a number of other groups, but then we found in the Cairo Geniza, which is been just this unbelievable trove of great documents. I mean, I was talking about it with in a previous podcast with our friend Willow. Um, they found ketubas, which is the marriage contract that gave
Hmm.
women far more rights than they have under present rabbinic law, in terms of divorce and stuff like that. And but but you know, it's the Cairo of Geniza version of it. For apostates, may there be no hope unless they return to your Torah, and the kingdom of arrogance may you quickly uproot in our days, and may the Christians, who they refer to as Notzarim, and the Minim perish in an instant. May they be erased from the book of life, and alone with the righteous may they not be written. Blessed art thou, O Lord, who humbles the arrogant ones. Um,
Whew.
yeah, it's so
That's
Notzarim.
pretty. Yeah. And
We we think it we think it's a
what's
play
funny
on the
is
word
the
Nazarene, and
yeah.
so
That's I was gonna say I was hearing that. Um, and I have that noted actually here elsewhere too. Yeah. But the well, I know totally lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry.
it happens to me all the time.
Uh
It's aging.
I was looking through my notes quickly and it was like just phew, like right out. Well, what's ironic, I think is what I was going to say is what's ironic is that I'm hearing some of David's Psalms in that. Like there's very similar, well, there's borrowed language from some of the Psalms of like, of what they're seeking from the Lord in terms of righteous anger and action, but then there's the very obvious hard right
Yeah.
into those guys in particular. Smack that smite button, oh Lord. Yeah. and smiteth them today. Yeah,
It's
the yeah,
and we also have one of the capstone prayers of our daily prayer services, or our thrice daily prayer services, is the Elenu.
yeah.
And we do have a section in there that some people omit, and more traditional folks don't. For they bow to vanity and emptiness. And there's some other language, and we've that has ended up on the cutting room floor. So this is the problem with being Jewish, of course, is we could say like heavy-handed things like this: "Hey, God, punish these idolaters, punish these
Right.
heretics." But then, is a population that is for 2,000 years been entirely at the mercy of its host countries, which are, for our experiences, have been prevailingly Muslim or Christian. Um, it's really dangerous to have liturgy like that laying
hmm
around. And also, like,
What's the age on that prayer? Like when was
that
that? When is that thought to have been written?
we go back. This one goes back to at least a Babylonian Talmud. I have the tractate on my shelf over here. It's Barachot, tractate Barachot, which defines all the prayers, and
hmm
it's attributed to Rabbi Gamaliel the second, not the
Gotcha.
original, but
Yeah.
uh, it's so it does date to at least the Babylonian Talmud. And
So mid first millennia, so like five, 600.
yeah, enough where, like, you're not too far away from the living. Although it's weird, like our country turns what 250 years this year,
hmm
and I 250 years ago feels positively ancient to me. So like a 500-year difference between, it's like that. It took a while for that. To me, that takes a while to get around to it. That's several generations, to get around to this. And so I
Yeah.
don't know. Um, Although it's believed, ostensibly they're just collecting stuff that already existed too. So it may be older than the actual writing of and compilation of the Babylonian Talmud. So
Well, and it could even be a later edition.
yeah, well, you never
Is it,
know.
does
We
it appear at the end? You said it appears at the end of the prayer?
Oh no, it's in the first. It's in the. Look, I'll go grab it here. Hi. It's uh it's helpful to have the keep these on hand here. I It's 72, 74 books of just joy. I'm not going to be able to find it here quickly, so I'm not going to waste our time with that. But it's yeah, it's that's literally the first tractate in the Babylonian Talmud. So um, it's it's but it defines prayer, and that it defines a lot, like the prayer practices. It has a gada, which are stories about prayer, like how we come to these conclusions. It's there's a lot in there, but that they took the time to specifically say this is so important that you've got to include it in one of your 18 supplications. And bear in mind that this prayer is designed to replace temple sacrifice. It is our replacement for the we have a special one in the after the Torah service. We have a Musaf.
hmm
That one mentions that specific Musaf sacrifice. Um, and we'll have special inserts for the holidays, but it's supposed to replace the temple service, um, by correlating to what the temple service looked like in prayer. So it's really unusual to me that there was something, like, I cannot fathom that there was in the temple service that took place anything like, well, we're gonna stab this donkey over, not donkey, but we're gonna stab this bird over heretics.
Right.
The prayer, it's really unusual to me that they would stick that to this very important prayer. And it's everything else is usually like, hey, do something positive, and this one's like, for these people, flick them. you know
Yeah.
Divine smite flick.
Divine
It's
smite lick. Yeah.
it's
So would you say then that like I'd be curious to dig into this more, not necessarily tonight, but to dig into this more, knowing that like say after the rise of um like post Sasanian Empire, right? Um, as the Jews then are not necessarily forced out of Babylonia, but as they disperse more into what becomes then like the later Jewish centers of what, like Egypt, Spain, Germany,
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, um, uh, like where did the like what additional changes maybe were made to these
There
things, like these writings, like what, like because I know that shifts then the kind of schools of thought.
there is a great book, and my rabbi is going to be really pleased that I'm bringing this guy up because he's one of his favorites. Rabbi Jose Faror. We kind of call him Hacham, which is like the Sephardic term for a teacher. Um, he wrote a fantastic book called, um, oh, what is it? The Gospel According to the Jews. And I, it's it covers really good stuff on this. Now, this guy, I can't find an attribution for this, but I've been told, and this is not going to sound like what it sounds like. Somebody asked him once if the Jews killed Jesus, and he said, yes, and we do it again. And but his point wasn't to be like, glib or mean.
Right,
It was that, we, it everything that happened because, our intertwined relationships across the years. So there was that, like Rambam, Maimonides, he he called Christian, definitely considered Christianity to be a vodazara, idol worship, or at least a polytheistic religion, because of
mm,
the Trinity. Uh, but he still termed it as part of God's plan to spread the Torah throughout the earth. So there's some hostility. And I think a lot of the times what people are saying, what our figures are saying is Christianity perfectly fine for the goys, not so much for the Jews. And I think that's I mean, like most of it seems geared at, hey, don't take up their ways, don't become Apicorus, don't go that direction, stay on the derrick, stay on the way with Judaism, don't turn to Christianity. But, you know, there's a lot of good stuff about it, but just not for us. And that's
right, right.
and I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah, them not us, kind of. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Well, and the
I
reason I
I
asked is like we just knowing where historically things led and how things shifted. Uh, just of course, like what happens after what 13th century Mongol invasion.
yeah.
I mean, that's huge expulsion then. Um, I mean, the Jews pretty much fled Mesopotamian area completely. I mean,
Yeah.
I know many stayed. I know there were some that stayed. Like there were communities that flourished pretty much up until even till like what 1950s.
Yeah,
Um,
until
like
1948.
yeah,
It's
well, yeah. Um,
um
where like there were still families living there. Like a lot of Sephardic Jews were still in the area, but like the knowing how that history has shifted, I'm just curious. Like I want to spend more time now after this conversation looking at how this ended up being shifted. Because what's so strange is like reading the early church fathers and knowing that while there were some that uh, wrote and were used to promote a lot of anti-Semitic ideas, um, but then also knowing that there are like you know theologians and church leaders who come not that much long after historically who are of a completely different mind. And where you even go just like even just 1,000 years forward, and you've got you know people saying this is absolutely not how it should be.
I
And
think it waxes and wanes. I think it
Yeah.
waxes and wanes,
Well, because
and
even what I'm seeing today in terms of, well, the anti-Semitism that I see online, right? That's coming not from any one source, but rather everywhere. And it's what bothers me is well, okay, so let's go to more current events. The statement made by that you probably saw, the church patriarchs in the Holy Land who have
oh
taken it upon
yes,
themselves to speak
yeah,
for Christendom in the Holy Land and
the
disavow
the Christian
anybody
Zionism is bad, and
like
you
anybody that
know
believes that Israel should actually exist is somehow Satan. I'm
it's
like, what?
you, you know
Like,
I don't. It's funny that probably upset Christians more than it upset me. It's
oh
for
yeah. I mean, that was
for
like saying that was a slap in the face of anybody who is not in any like one of the because I mean you had what Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Egyptian Coptic, Mana Mononistic, uh, and then there was a fifth one. It might have been the Armenian Church because they're Orthodox. But like you've got these five groups who are not Roman Catholic, but are centered in Jerusalem. And so like I get that you feel, and when I say you, I mean them. I get that they feel like they're being pushed aside by probably Christians globally, saying that this is a place that should exist and like these, this is something that should be protected and we should support.
yeah,
That doesn't mean this is the misinterpretation that drives me crazy. That doesn't mean politically.
you
That
know
means that means that simply people can believe that Israel can and should exist. Like,
I just think that making theological declarations about it in any direction are probably
yeah.
deeply problematic.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's political, it's diplomatic, it's the state of it's international relations. What it's not, and it probably shouldn't be because it's a secular state. It's not a theological dispute. It exists. Um, and maybe this is the problem, like Christian Zionism, if it's rooted in theology, may itself be problematic. I'm grateful for the friendship and the support for my part, but you
Yeah.
know, if it has a theological basis, unless the state was founded by God and himself, and wrought by the hand of God and not, created about by the sacrifice of Jewish fighters, um, I think that it's really dangerous to get into the theological ground on it.
Right.
I may be wrong, but like in any direction, it's the hazard. It's why if people say, "Oh, if I bless Israel, I'll be blessed." I'm like, maybe, but you're probably going to have a bad day and stub your toe at some point. And I just I
Yeah.
like
I just think I think there's a great deal of hubris in any group saying now some of that hubris in a sense is justified in that they are the churches that are there,
yeah.
right? Get that.
Eh,
Like
they live with
respect.
and
They're
there's a
living
lot
in
of
the middle of all
indignity.
of it.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of indignity visited on their parishioners. I get
Oh
it.
yeah.
It's
And well, and then when you look at like the weird status quo relationships that have been developed over the millennia to allow for uh both the church, like well, all faiths to coalesce there.
yeah,
Uh like coalesce, commingle,
yeah.
right word. Yeah.
Maintain possession of their stuff over,
Yeah. Like, yeah, this is mine. Yeah. And like so you see that. I mean, I get that there is some this is my territory, like basically don't crap in my cornflakes kind of thing.
yeah,
Like I get that. At the same time, there was an there that approach was heinous in that it was like not only do you have no say in what Christendom does here, shut up. And like that was just really it was offensive the way they handled it. And the it's kind of it kind of maybe puts off this idea that like it was a delegitimizing statement to the church across the world in the sense that they're saying, don't touch our stuff. But like, yes, you're the church there, but like technically, that by just virtue of what it is and where it is, in a sense, we've all got a stake in that from a faith perspective and a historical perspective. It not it's a different kind of stake. Like it's not, we're not there, obviously, but like, damn that was an arrogant statement to say, like, don't try and tell us, we'll tell you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
they don't speak on behalf of any movements other than the specific churches in Jerusalem. So
yeah,
it doesn't keep me awake at night. What does keep me awake at night is uh, the shift eh, in American Protestantism on the matter of Israel and the accompanying anti-Semitism. Like I
yeah.
truly believe there are people that just really, you know, for I'm sure there are austere motives behind some of these beliefs, but I just wish they wouldn't feel compelled to make our, Jewish American lives miserable. Well, Jewish lives anywhere miserable, but
Yeah.
I, whatever. I got something for them if they want to talk to me about it directly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Same.
where I'm at.
And I've got well, and like, what I hate is the what I really am bothered by is just like the constant little jibes. It's not there's no overt. Well, it's at this point it's so obvious that it's overt, but like they're not overt statements of like, it's
It
stuff
was
like
it was the
don't
heritage.
look at
It
don't
was the
look at your
heritage.
pager and you know
Well, well,
you know
I joke about pagers.
dude,
I'm
honestly,
I'm
same, but
terrible.
like it's dark humor, right? Like we're gonna do that, but
But
like it doesn't.
no,
It's not. It's
it's the
not being
little
done in that kind of. It's not
it's
being
the
done in the way that you and I would make that joke.
Yeah, but it's the jokes, it's the Heritage Foundation stuff. It's the with Nick
Yeah.
Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and that
Oh,
whatever.
dude, let
It's
me put it this way: if I have a hard time with anyone who looks at them and says these guys are believers in any way, because
it's
no,
it's
especially Fuentes. That guy's a dirtbag. And
it it's the other coded stuff. It's the politicians that say like put ape. We have one here in Maine that APAC is terrible. I won't take a dime from APAC, and maybe we should spend money on our failing rural health care. Presenting it as a false choice between
hmm
supporting Israel and that's why you don't have good health care in Maine. That it's all those little things. It's death by a thousand cuts. It creates
Yep.
hostility. And I'm doing a separate program on it. We just I submitted written testimony because there was a bomb threat at the Capitol yesterday over it. Not over this,
Oh,
but
geez. Okay.
we the Jewish community in Maine has been organizing around. There's LD 1383. It's a They've worded it that it's any country deemed to be serving interest. It's a divestment bill. It's a BDS
It's a
divestment bill.
BDS. Yeah, it's disguised as something else, but it's clearly a BDS bill. Yeah.
And if it passes, Maine would be the first state in the union to specifically target Israel because that's what it's about.
Mm.
And we fought it. We've gotten a lot of support, in opposition to the bill in the legislature. Governor Mills is going to veto it if it does pass somehow, but it's going to have to go through four different because of procedurally.
Right. It's
What
got to go
pisses
through committee and it's got to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
other thing that sucks about Maine is that we have a part-time legislature, so we have a long session, we have a short session.
Yep.
Short session is supposed to be reserved for like emergency bills. Somehow they got this crap in committee, and which is really in itself infuriating. But then on top of that, it's going to get like four separate house or four votes at some point. It's going to be vote
Jeez.
between the House and the Senate, and it's I think we have we have it. I don't think a single Republican's going to vote for it, and most of the Democrats we know are right-headed on it. But we have a couple of uh, people that I don't know how to put this nicely, even from our area, that I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire. That I know will support it, and 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 they just my argument is the same. Like, number one, it's going to cause hell for our investments, because for pensioners, it makes pension funds really, you start politicizing pension funds in this particular way.
Oh, the management of any kind of investment becomes nightmarish.
Right. And then on the second part of it is, it's just like the all the little divestment measures that the municipalities took up. Now, I'm very proud. Rabbi Seamers and I organized the effort against one of those little things here in Bangor. I think we were the one of the rare instances where we managed to defeat that. But they passed one in Portland, Maine. They passed one in little old Belfast down the road, and it's largely symbolic, and it doesn't really actually do anything. But what it does do is automatically other anybody that supports Israel in the state, particularly Jewish supporters of Israel, and it just creates social disharmony for no good reason. But it makes them feel good, and
Hmm.
that's the appeal to pathos is what kills any kind of dialogue, any point. They could get any business they want to boycott Israel. They could get any, they could private citizens, whoever. But the minute you specifically target one nation among all of them for this kind of thing, and they can say, oh yeah, well, we could target China with it as well. Well, you won't, because
Right,
that'll kill your pension fund. And if you do that, and
right.
it's it's garbage bill from a garbage legislator down in southern Maine, and I'm so done. Ah, but talk that to death.
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah, well, I guess this one is a good one to end on.
yeah.
It's and then the next one we'll jump on will be like would be really short, just a comparison, some note comparison on how we relate to the binding of Isaac in Genesis 22.
Hmm.
And and I'm gonna stop recording.